All right, that's part of the open for The Apprentice, of course. You see one-time reality television star Donald Trump there and his kids. That was all before he was a presidential candidate. 14 seasons on that show helped transform him from the target of tabloids to ultimately something of an American icon. Patrick Radden Keefe has a piece in the new issue of The New Yorker which profiles Mark Burnett, the creator of The Apprentice and Survivor, but it also really has a fascinating look at the sort of rise of the new Donald Trump. And Patrick joins us now. Great to have you here with us. Thanks so much. As one of the projects that you did, this piece, it looks like you've worked on it for years, too.
It took a while.
It was a long time. But
There's a lot in there.
You went back and watched many episodes of The Apprentice. And note that now that Donald Trump is president, there's nothing ironic about the filming or the depiction of then businessman Donald Trump in these shows.
Well, this was one of the mysteries for me. I lived in New York City in the 1990s, and I remember the kind of figure that Trump was in the culture. And he was a little bit of a joke at that point. He'd had a bunch of bankruptcies. He was in the tabloids all the time. And there's Trump before The Apprentice and then Trump after, and he's completely transformed. So I went back to look at the show and think, you know, are they portraying this guy as this real icon? Is it a little tongue-in-cheek? And to me, it wasn't at all.
It's fascinating too as you walk through, you know, how Mark Burnett came upon Donald Trump and sort of found his man. What's fascinating to me is he figured out too one of the best ways to appeal to Donald Trump is through flattery, and even going to the point where he says, I mean, this was in 2013. He was talking about it. I need to show respect to Mr. Trump, he said, and this was when he was at a skating rink here in Central Park, which Donald Trump had leased at that point, didn't own, and he started talking about the Trump Woolman skating rink. The Trump Woolman skating rink is a fine facility built by Mr. Donald Trump. Thank you, Mr. Trump, because the Trump Woolman skating rink is the place we are tonight, and we love being at the, again, Trump Woolman skating rink. He figured out as many times as he could say Donald Trump and attribute this to him. It worked. And Donald Trump came over afterwards with effusive praise and talk about a love affair.
And says, you're a genius.
Yes.
Yeah, exactly. No, this is, I think this is Burnett's genius. He was this British paratrooper. He'd had, kind of came from humble beginnings, joined the Army in his teens, came to California afterward and wanted to make it in the TV business. And one of his great insights was that it's all about the kind of the handling of talent. And I think he saw a charisma in Trump that other people hadn't necessarily seen. He realized this guy could be magnetic on television in good ways or bad ways, depending on your point of view. And he fixed on that and made Trump a star.
And he was better at it even when he wasn't on script. He couldn't stay on script, as you know, but even then, he was better television.
Well, this was part of what was amazing. I talked to a bunch of people who worked on The Apprentice over the years, and they said, yeah, you'd give Trump a script and he couldn't read it. He'd be tripping over the words. It was a disaster. But off the cuff, when he's just improvising, he had this kind of zesty banter thing where he'd insult people, and he was, you know, a little pushy and kind of imperious. And on TV, that's magic. You know, you'd want to bottle that.
He also really went with his gut, too, you point out. That's one of the things that the editors had to deal with, that Donald Trump would go with his gut on the show, which wasn't always what they expected, and they had to sort of edit in reverse.
Well, this was one of the things that really knocked me out in the reporting, is talking to the people who edited The Apprentice. So they would shoot, for every hour of TV you watched, they would shoot 300 hours of footage over the course of a week, all these different cameras following different people. And sometimes you'd have a real standout candidate who did a great job and was really the best person and should be the one to, you know, kind of go home a winner that week. But Trump would show up in the boardroom at the end of the week, and he hadn't been paying attention to what came before. He would just show up and he'd decide he didn't like that person, or, you know, they bothered him on that particular day, and he would fire them. So then the editors have to go back and figure out, well, what's the story we can tell here where it makes sense that he fired the best person? And I talked to one of the editors, and they said, you know, I take a little comfort looking at the White House and knowing that now his staff has to do the same thing.
Honestly, it's the White House. It's people having to reverse. There have been articles written about how he has to reverse engineer, or White House staffers have to reverse engineer actions based on things that he impulsively does. And that's exactly what that sounded like.
That whole pattern was established on The Apprentice.
All right, Mark Burnett, creator of The Apprentice, creator of Survivor, reluctant a bit to talk about politics and the Trump presidency, which people that you spoke to for this article found somewhat puzzling.
Yeah, I mean, I talked to a whole bunch of people who are involved in every aspect of The Apprentice, and a lot of these people now, you know, have doubts about they feel about all this. And they look back. On the one hand, this was a great professional experience. On the other hand, a number of them told me without that show, Trump would never have become president. Burnett remains friends with Trump. He's not out here. He's not going to be on CNN as like a Trump proxy or defender, but he's also not condemning Trump. They're still close. They still talk. But I think it puts him in a complicated position.
Do you think part of that is because he has seen what can happen if you do go against Donald Trump?
I think that's right. And I think, it's that idea that he always flattered Trump. He was always saying things like, oh, it's Batman and Robin, and I'm Robin.
Yeah.
And he knew how to kind of push Trump's buttons in that way. I don't think he would really come out and speak out against Trump. But it's interesting because I think, to my mind, without a doubt, this is the first line of Mark Burnett's obituary. I mean, he's created some amazing TV shows, but he also basically helped put a man in the White House.
All right, the question that Mark Burnett probably gets asked most at cocktail parties around the country is, are there tapes? Do these tapes exist? And the myth or the legend out there is that there are outtakes from The Apprentice where then, businessman Donald Trump uses the N-word or says other offensive things. You've been looking into this as much as anyone else. Do you think these tapes exist?
So we know that there is a huge archive of tapes, tens of thousands of hours of tapes that now belong to MGM, which bought Mark Burnett's company. I came to conclude that probably there is not a tape in which Trump says the N-word. There are a couple of people who say they've heard it. It's Omarosa and Tom Arnold, and I'll leave it to you to judge, how seriously to take that. I couldn't find anybody else who'd actually said they'd heard this tape. And I did talk to a bunch of people, again, the editors, who didn't like Trump at all, who saw a huge amount of that footage, and they said, look, if this tape existed, if anybody knew, I would know, and somebody would have leaked it. Because
it would be out by now.
It would be out by now. There's all these people who would have had access to it, and these people told me if Trump used the N-word on a hot mic, that would have been passed around among the editors, and it would have come out. It would have leaked. Not because Mark Burnett and MGM said, oh, let us turn it over, but it would have leaked in the way that the Access Hollywood tape leaked, where somebody just leaks it to the Washington Post.
It's fascinating. It's a great read.
Yeah,
it's absolutely fascinating read.
Pat, thanks so much for being here. Go check out the article in New Yorker. It's well worth your time, everybody.